Shabbat Shalom, and we are going to begin with our blessing for studying Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with words of Torah. So just to catch up from last week. So last week, we saw that, interesting, Sherry, hi, you're up on the screen. I don't know why. Okay, last week we saw that David became basically the king of the southern kingdom, right, of Judah. And in the north, we still have a son of Saul. And then there's now sort of a civil war going on. And the two generals, Joab, who was David's general and nephew, and Abner are fighting. And I don't remember if Abner got killed yet. Let's see. I think did Abner get killed last time? I can't remember now. Anybody remember if Abner got killed? They were going after him. Oh, wait, let's see. Oh, yeah, Joab had turned back from pursuing Abner. Okay, so he's not dead yet. All right, they're still after him. Okay, so we are going to begin with chapter 3 of the second book of Samuel. And spoiler alert, oh God, I told you that he gets killed. I'm sorry. A lot of people do get killed, unfortunately. I won't tell you who else, all right? Keep that a mystery. Okay, I'm trying to set this up. Okay, now I will share it. All right, here we are. So we're having this civil war going on. Would somebody like to begin reading? I can't see everybody. So did somebody raise their hand? Doug, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I can read. Sorry, I was having mutation issues.
Mutation. Okay. Yeah, there is not a good Zoom event without some mutation issues.
I'm telling you, it's just the way it is. All right, so the war between the house of Saul and the house of David lasted a long time. David grew stronger and stronger while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon, the son of Ahinoam of Jezreel. His second, Gilead, the son of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. The third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, daughter of Tamar, king of Geshur. The fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. The fifth, Sephatiah, the son of Abital, and the sixth, Ephraim, the son of David's wife, Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron.
Very good. I'm sorry I gave you all those awful names to pronounce. So now remember these guys. Amnon is important. He'll come back. No spoiler alert about what happens with him. Okay. Absalom. So he's the son of the daughter of the king of Geshur. So according to Robert Alter, that's an alliance that he's now forged with the north. Okay, because he's in the north. So just remember that David is always very, very strategic. He doesn't do things just, oh, I love you. No, maybe I lust you. We'll see that in a minute, but not I love you. Yeah, I'll get you in Jason just one sec. So Amnon, Absalom, very important. Adonijah will be important much later. The rest of them, we don't hear that much about them. Okay, go ahead, Jason.
Well, I was just wondering if anyone else noticed that you take until the sixth one until it identifies his wife and all the others not wives. At this point, how many wives does he have, and does it even matter at this point?
Yeah, no, he has a lot of wives. The ones that are important are Michal, Abigail, and then there'll be another one soon. I'm not sure we're going to get to it today. We may get to it next time. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, here we go. Oh, hi. Good to see you, Suzanne. All righty. So just because you weren't here before, I want to catch you up as well, which is that David has become the king of Judah, and there's still Saul, a son of Saul in the north. And so there's two kingdoms pretty much, and there's a civil war pretty much going on right now. And Joab is David's general and nephew, and Abner is Saul's general. So, but we just found out who all of David's kids are up to this point. He's gotten a lot of wives, and each one serves a certain political purpose. Okay, back to here. All right. Now, Abner is, remember, Saul's general. And remember, there was a whole thing between him and Joab was running after him and was going to kill him, but he didn't. So in a very loyal fashion, let's see what happens. These, you don't have to read these headlines here because they're not put in by any Jewish source. I just happen to like this translation, but it's a Christian translation. So, okay, go ahead. Thank you, Doug.
And no worries. All right. So during the war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner had been strengthening his own position in the house of Saul. Now Saul had had a concubine named Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, and Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why did you sleep with my father's concubine?"
Okay, this is important. Remember who else slept with their father's concubine? Oops. Anybody remember who else slept with their father's concubine?
You mean in the past?
In the past.
Oh, because I know what happens in the future.
You know what happens in the future. Yes, and that's going to be important too. And yeah. So remember Jacob's son,
that's right.
Reuben, slept with his
Right.
father's concubine. Remember that?
Oh,
And if you sleep with your father's concubine, it's not just, oh, well, we couldn't help ourselves. It is a power play. It's a way to say, I'm taking some power away from you. Okay. It's not an innocent or sudden act, despite maybe some lust. But aside from that, the fact is it's a way. I mean, Abner is sleeping with, this guy's concubine. Don't do that. And that's going to be important later. So keep that in mind also. So Abner, not only is sleeping with Ishbosheth, remember him? He's the Saul's son, who is theoretically the king, but Abner kind of put him there, and Abner is sort of more in charge of him than he's of Abner. And now he's like showing him yet one more, way in which he's superior. Okay, please continue.
Abner was very angry because of what Ishbosheth said. So he answered, "Am I a dog's head on Judah's side? This very day I am loyal to the house of your father Saul and to his family and friends. I haven't handed you over to David, yet now you accuse me of an offense involving this woman. May God deal with Abner, be it ever so severely, if I do not do for David what the Lord promised him on oath, and transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and establish David's throne over Israel and Judah from Dan to Bathsheba." Ishbosheth did not dare to say another word to Abner because he was afraid of him.
Okay, so, Abner is saying, you are completely dependent on me. It's because of me that you're where you are. And I protected you on top of that. And, watch out. So this poor guy, is not exactly a strong personality, and he's not going to do what he needs to do to keep Abner on his side. Okay.
Then Abner sent messages on his behalf to say to David, "Whose land is it? Make an agreement with me, and I'll help you bring all Israel over to you." "Good," said David. "I'll make an agreement with you, but I demand one thing of you. Do not come into my presence unless you bring Michal, daughter of Saul, when you come to see me." Then David sent messages to Ishbosheth, son of Saul, demanding, "Give me my wife, Michal, whom I betrothed to myself for the price of 100 Philistine foreskins." Well, that's lovely. And so
I read a little more and then we'll talk about it.
Gave orders and had her taken away from her husband, Paltiel, son of Laish. Her husband, however, went with her, weeping behind her all the way to Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, "Go back home." So he went back.
Now, this is really a poignant scene. Remember, the last we saw Michal, first of all, we saw her being very brave and being very loyal to her lovely husband, David, right? She put him out the window to save him from being killed by her father. And this is so interesting what pops up on the screen. We see Doug drinking. It's supposed to be speaker view. So in my recording, Doug, you are somehow channeling me through you. Okay, I don't know what's wrong with this stupid thing today. Okay, so Michal, she loved him. She protected him. Why did he marry her?
It brings him into Saul's household.
Right.
In fact, he was supposed to marry the older sister,
right?
But she married somebody else.
Well, because Saul said, if you do this,
right,
I'm going to give, it's Goliath. Remember, if you kill Goliath, I will give you my older son, Merav.
Uh-huh.
And then he didn't. He's not always true to his word. Right. Then he said, if you give me the foreskin of 100 Philistines, I'll, give you Michal. Now, Michal, he married her because it allows him to be in the royal household, right? Gives him some legitimacy, kind of. But, you never hear that he loves her or anything. And we just see that she saves his life. And then the other thing we see is that somehow once he's, had to flee from Saul, because Saul's constantly trying to kill him. Once he flees to the south, Saul gives Michal away to some other guy, Paltiel, just like that. I don't know what legitimacy there is to that if she's already married to David, but I'm sure he figured something out. So now that, David is king over Judah, and he's been told by Abner, I'm going to give you the whole country. And he knows that God has already told him that he's going to be king over the whole country. He wants to get his legitimacy back and get Michal back, not for any other reason. It's not like I miss her, I love her, I want her back. He just needs her in his household. So he sends Abner to bring her back. And she's married to this other guy who clearly loves her, unlike David. And he's crying while he's accompanying her to say goodbye. It's really, really a poignant scene. And the next time we see David with Michal, it'll be a very, very different circumstance. And it's really sad. Her life is really tragic. So any comments, questions before we continue? No. Okay. We are going to proceed with this. Okay. Go ahead, Doug.
All right. Abner conferred with the elders of Israel and said, for some time you have wanted to make David your king. Now do it. For the Lord promised David, by my servant David, I will rescue my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies. Abner also spoke to the Benjamites in person. Then he went to Hebron to tell David everything that Israel and the whole tribe of Benjamin wanted to do. When Abner, who had 20 men with him, came to David at Hebron, David prepared a feast for him and his men. Then Abner said to David, let me go at once and assemble all Israel for my lord the king, so that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may rule over all that your heart desires. So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Okay,
so he went in peace. Well, I hate to give you another spoiler alert, but here we have a headline that's going to tell you what's going to happen. Okay.
Just then David's men and Joab returned from a raid and brought with them a great deal of plunder. But Abner was no longer with David in Hebron, because David had sent him away and he'd gone in peace. When Joab and all the soldiers with him arrived, he was told that Abner, son of Ner, had come to the king, and the king had sent him away, and that he had gone in peace.
Notice how many times, I'm sorry, just notice how many times it says he's going in peace. Sounds really nice, right? Like he's okay. Okay.
So Joab went to the king and said, what have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why did you let him go? Now he is gone. You know Abner, son of Ner. He came to deceive you and observe your movements and find out everything you were doing. Joab then left David and sent messengers about Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern of Serah. But David did not know it. Now, when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into an inner chamber as if to speak with him privately. So there, to avenge the blood of his brother Asahel, Joab stabbed him in the stomach and he died.
Now remember that Abner had killed Asahel. So there's this, honor killing in this society. If you kill one of my relatives, like my brother, you're going to get it, right? So that's been looming above the story, is, because Joab had the opportunity to kill Abner before. For some reason, he didn't do it right then and there. It's sort of like a cat playing with a mouse, let me tease you a bit and make it like I'm just playing with you. And so he's going to kill the guy. Now, it says David did not know. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Because it's going to be very convenient to have this guy gone, because we don't know. He said to David, I'm going to help you become king over all of Israel. But, was he spying for Ishbosheth, or was he really going to come over to the other side? It's not entirely clear, even though the little headline that was put in there said that he goes over to the other side, but it's not clear that, that was his, full intention. Joab, who is very shrewd, may well be correct. He's just spying on you. So we don't know. But in any event, Joab has a reason to kill this guy. And even the guy, is told, we keep being told over and over again, he's going in peace. Well, guess what? Not so much. And, he tricks him into speaking privately, which we've seen happen before in other circumstances, and he kills him. So what's David going to do about that? Oh, wait, Suzanne, you raised your hand. Yes. Oh, and then Jane, Suzanne, and then Jane, sorry.
My question was, does the phrase "he went in peace," does that refer, is it specific in any way in terms of his intentions versus the intentions of other people towards him?
I
Do you know what
think
I'm asking?
yeah, I understand what you're asking. I think it's the latter. Let me just see if by any chance there's a comment about that in Alter. I don't remember seeing anything. I don't see. Yeah, he doesn't mention anything that. I think it said he goes in peace, like, everything's cool. That's my understanding of it. Like he, they're not, he's okay. They're not gonna, necessarily do anything to him.
I guess my question was if it meant his intentions.
No, no,
Then-
as I said, I think it means the intentions of the other people around him.
Okay.
That's
okay,
what
so
I think it is.
He was not molested then, in other words. Or
Right,
something like that.
until
Yeah,
he was
okay.
killed. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, yeah.
Right. Okay. Jane?
I can't remember the title of the book I read this past summer, but it's a political history of David's reign. And one of the things that they point out, the authors point out, is how many murders take place and how many murders and deaths take place around David. And you always have this question of how much did he know?
Exactly.
He seems to be one step removed
Yes.
from the actual event, but he has a number of henchmen who
Yes.
carry out his wishes.
Exactly. It's exactly what somebody was saying before about the person at the front desk of a doctor's
me.
office.
Yeah,
That was you. Okay.
Yeah, that was me.
Right.
Yeah.
So the
I was
person who's,
thinking Trump.
yeah, the person who's at the front desk of a doctor's office is going to, or the secretary of some powerful CEO, they are carrying out what they know their boss wants. And if it's to protect the boss from having too many phone calls or visits or whatever, the person's going to behave in that way. If they want to be open and welcoming and warm, they'll be that way. Because it is a reflection of the boss. So, yeah, I mean, Joab he's his nephew, but he selected him to be his general. And, maybe he gets what's going on, but we'll see how he's going to keep himself even more distance. Because theoretically, yeah.
And the other thing that they pointed out is
That's your alarm, wake up.
no, it's not. It's a person I'm going to meet. The other thing that these authors pointed out was that the murders take place so that they can move. The murderers move up in the hierarchy closer to David.
Right. He's a mob boss.
He is.
He has been, as we've seen, he is a mob boss, right? Said that? Oh, Christine. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, he's a mob boss, and he's interested in power. We saw that from the very, very beginning. The whole business. Let me mute her. The whole business with David and Goliath. he knew right away, and he asked several times, what is it that's going to happen if this person kills Goliath? He's calculating from the very, very beginning. And that will serve him well in certain ways, and in other ways it won't. Just like everything, there's the up and the downside of a particular personality trait. And, with all this blood in his hands, it says in the Book of Chronicles, that's why he couldn't build the temple. Because he's doing it by blood. Solomon later on will do it by marriage. He's going to get all these people on his side because he's going to marry all these different women from different places. But, somebody's got to do the dirty work first, unfortunately, right? Okay, let's go back to our text. Okay, Doug, here's when David's going to find out about it.
Later, when David heard about this, he said, I and my kingdom are forever innocent before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner, son of Ner. May his blood fall on the head of Joab and on his whole family. May Joab's family never be without someone who has a running sore or leprosy, or who leans on a crutch, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks food. Joab and his brother Abishai murder Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel in the battle of Gibeon.
Okay, let's just stop for 1 second. So notice what David is doing here. What's he doing?
He's claiming innocence.
Well, he's claiming innocence, and what else is he doing?
Scapegoating. I mean, he's blaming Joab.
Yeah, I mean, he's condemning Joab, even though I'm sure he's thrilled to death, but he's blaming he's cursing Joab's family.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this was a terrible thing to do. So not only am I shocked that this has happened, but on top of that, and I'm telling you, I swear that I know nothing about this, but on top of that, he's cursing Joab and his family because this is a way to show that he really, really has nothing to do with it. Okay.
But
Yep.
then there's the little parenthetical reminder that, in fact, Joab was doing nothing wrong, in the sense of revenge.
I guess you could say, well, I don't know if he's doing
Well,
nothing wrong, but it gives him some justification, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Well, yes.
And it's in parens by whoever put this
Oh,
translation
I thought
together.
it was part of the actual text. Okay.
Well, no. It is the oh, that's a dog I see in the mirror. I saw the shaking little thing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's my life.
Yeah.
Little shaking dogs.
Yeah. But it's funny because I saw it in the mirror, anyway. So yeah, so he's okay, all of these parentheses and things and number, that's all been put in since it was written. So the Torah has, and the Tanakh, there's no punctuation, there are no parens. It's this particular editor decided that's a parenthetical statement.
Okay.
So ignore ignore headlines and punctuation.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go back to the text and go down a little bit. Okay, if you don't mind, Doug.
And David said to Joab and all the people with him, tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and walk in mourning in front of Abner. King David himself walked behind the bier. They buried Abner in Hebron, and the king wept aloud at Abner's tomb. All the people wept also. The king sang this lament for Abner. Should Abner have died as the lawless die? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. You fell as one falls before the wicked. And all the people wept over him again.
So now he's laying on another layer of distancing himself, right? First, it's like, I know nothing about it, I swear. Cursed be Joab and all his, kin. And now he's weeping and wailing, right? Weeping and wailing. And this is also, remember this scene for later. Okay. He's a good performative person, performance artist. So he's showing all of this stuff to show that he really had nothing to do with this. Okay. Okay.
And they all came and urged David to eat something while it was still day. But David took an oath, saying, may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I taste bread or anything else before the sun sets. All the people took note and were pleased. Indeed, everything the king did pleased them. So on that day, all the people there and all Israel knew that the king had no part in the murder of Abner, son of Ner. Then the king said to his men, "Do you not realize that a commander and a great man has fallen in Israel this day? And today, though I am the anointed king, I am weak, and these sons of Zeruiah are too strong for me. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil deeds."
Thank you. Oh, Suzanne, I found something that you asked about. Let me just, okay, so this is, I finally found it. Okay, so this goes back to David sent Abner off and he went in peace. The going in peace befits the feast of reconciliation and the agreed on pact. The writer contrives to repeat the sentence verbatim 3 times. But when Joab refers to this very same departure of Abner from Hebron, he substitutes for in peace, b'shalom, the emphatic infinitive halach, going off. This ominous substitution falls like the clatter of a dagger after the ringing of bells, especially because to go sometimes occurs in the Bible as a euphemism for dying. Holson has noted that this entire episode is a crowded juncture of comings and goings. Okay, so that's all he really says about that. But I think it is that, you know, the idea is that there's no animosity between them. There's no friction or problem or whatever. Everything's cool for right now.
So if he goes off, if it has the connotation that, does it have a connotation of like, if I'm sending you off in peace, that I'm sort of guaranteeing your safety, or?
That's, yes. I mean, I don't know that he guaranteed his safety. It just means that they parted on a good note.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
But
and
it seems more damning now.
yes, I think that's why it's repeated so many times.
Yeah.
So the going in peace is repeated and repeated and repeated. And it's ironic because he's not going in peace. We know very well that underneath it's all Joab has it in for him. So, but so what David's doing here is, you know, he's laying it on. He had nothing to do with this because Abner is a representative of Saul's kingdom, right? So killing Saul, killing his general doesn't look good. He wants it to look like it just happened. And so again, he's, you know, performing this whole, like, you know, mourning ritual to show and what I was thinking of, he does it in so many different ways. You know, he swears he didn't have anything to do with it. You know, he curses the family. He goes through this whole mourning process. It's sort of like, you know, flooding people with all your social media, you know, posts. There's the Instagram, the TikTok, the Twitter, the whatever. So everybody knows that you're innocent because the word is now spread to the whole country.
He's ticking off every box of
Yes.
sincerity.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. As Michael Lotker says, I couldn't be more sincere if I meant it. Okay, so let's, who would like to take the next chapter?
I'll read.
Okay,
go
Susie,
ahead, Dan.
we'll do
Go.
Susie and then Jane. Okay, so let's go back to this and go to the next chapter and go down here. Okay. Uh-oh, spoiler alert again. Sorry.
When Ishbosheth, son of Saul, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost courage, and all Israel became alarmed. Now Saul's son had 2 men who were leaders of raiding bands. One was named Baanah and the other Ribkah. They were sons of Rimmon and Beerothite, from the tribe of Benjamin. Beeroth is considered part of Benjamin because the people of Beeroth fled to Githam and have resided there as foreigners to this day.
Okay, so Ishbosheth, the king of the north, is now very nervous because Abner is the guy who got him up there and kept him going, and now he's really worried. This doesn't look good for me. And here's another parenthesis put in by the editor.
Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was lame in both feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled, but as she hurried to leave, he fell and became disabled. His name was Mephibosheth.
Mephibosheth. So, okay, the reason the editor put this in parenthesis is because it's certainly the same guy, Ishbosheth. And according to Alter, it was some sort of scribal error that he's got this other name here. But theoretically, I mean, it's the same guy because Ishbosheth can't really walk. And, you know, it's because the nurse dropped him. So that's why he put it in parenthesis. And then I think in the other translation I have, Ishbosheth keeps being referred to as Mephibosheth. But this particular translator decided to just go back to Ishbosheth. So it's a little confusing because sometimes names are different in different tellings of the story. But we're basically talking about Ishbosheth, who's lame. Okay.
Now Rechab and Baanah, the sons of Rimmon and Beerothite, set out for the house of Ishbosheth. And they arrived there in the heat of the day while he was taking his noonday rest. They went into the inner part of the house as if to get some wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and his brother Baanah slipped away.
Okay, so by the way, first of all, this guy, Ishbosheth, knows that he's vulnerable now, right? Because Abner has been killed. So what the heck's he doing lying around at night? I mean, in the middle of the day, unprotected. Apparently there don't seem to be any guards around. And he's just, you know, just shows his lack of being alert to what the situation is, right? And then on top of that, these guys who come in to assassinate him, it's pretty low to assassinate somebody when they're sound asleep, right? I mean, it's just kind of, Alter calls it scurrilous. And, you know, it's useful for David, and we're going to see how these guys are going to try to sell this. They're going to go to David and say, hey, look what we did. Isn't this terrific? Okay. So anybody have any comments? Should we continue? All right, let's continue. Okay, so okay.
Okay. They had gone into the house while he was lying on the bed in his bedroom. After they stabbed and killed him, they cut off his head. Taking it with them, they traveled all night by way of Arba. They brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron and said to the king, here's the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, your enemy, who tried to kill you. This day the Lord has avenged my lord, the king, against Saul and his offspring.
Okay, let's just stop for a second. So notice they think David's going to be really thrilled. And he will be. However, what happened last time? Remember there was an Amalekite who brought the news of Saul's death. And how did David react to that?
How dare you kill a king? How dare you?
Exactly. How dare you kill the king? And not only that, you know, now you're going to die, right? Again, as happy as he might be about the news and as useful as it is for him, he's not about to let anybody know that, right? So let's see what he does with these guys.
David answered Rechab and his brother Baanah, the sons of Rimmon and Beerothite. As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble, when someone told me Saul is dead and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and put him to death in Ziklag. That was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more when wicked men have killed an innocent man in his own house and on his own bed, Should I not now demand his blood from your hand and rid the earth of you? So David gave an order to his men, and they killed them. They cut off their hands and feet and hung the bodies by the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in Abner's tomb at Hebron.
Thank you.
Wow.
So, yeah, remember Saul got dismembered too. He had the head cut off and the, various parts of him hanging and, what Alter suggests is that this scene of dismemberment at the very end of this chapter is a sort of hint of the kind of dismemberment that will go, or mayhem that will go on during David's reign. I mean, I'm not sure that, I agree, but, he's smarter and more learned than I. So I think that's, certainly a possibility.
It happens now too. I know of a journalist that was dismembered.
That's true.
Exactly.
That's true. That's true. Christine, you had your hand up?
Yeah, does dismemberment interrupt the notion that, eventually there will be a
Right.
paradise and people will be
Oh.
brought, that, if they are entire? And so beheading, cutting off hands and feet, I mean, it basically is dooming them forever.
Yeah, and of course, they don't really care if people who are not Israelites, don't go to heaven or
Well,
have an after or be resurrected, right, from, at the end of days. But it's the body is a representative of God. We're a reflection of God in our bodies, our souls, and everything else. So dismembering a human being is kind of, an Israelite human being, right? The others, they don't seem to care about that much. But Jason?
Maybe it's too basic a point, but I feel like if you're a person in power, you don't want to give the impression that it's a good idea to go around and kill other powerful people whenever you feel like it, because someday they'll come for you and the people you like. And you have to set an example every time, as if you don't like this sort of thing, so that you don't encourage people to just take this action on a regular basis, because soon they'll come for you or your close people. Eventually, the cycles will shift.
Yeah.
And you don't want to make it popular to go around slaying people in their bedrooms.
Yes.
Even if you thought it was a good thing.
Yeah.
It seems like you can look at all these things very coldly, and somehow this whole idea of David did not know about it just reminds me of the scene in The Godfather, where all the killings,
Yeah.
all the enemies of the family are being killed while Michael's at the baptism, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's as if to say his hands are clean, he's involved in your ritual while all the murders are being committed in his name. I think it's just a matter of distancing yourself in a formal way, even when it.
I think you're right. I think it's both. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's both in the sense that on the one hand, of course, what you're saying, you don't want to have people get the idea that, oh, well, maybe we can also kill David. But at the same time, you don't want his reputation to be sullied by, his murderous ways, unless you're Putin. But actually, I was thinking unless you're Putin, except then I realized, wait a minute, Putin is completely controlling the media in Russia.
Mhm.
So that the Russian people don't see, oh, wait a minute. First of all, we have a brutal dictator running our country. And maybe blood is something we should give back to him. But at the same time, if they saw the resistance on the part of the Ukrainians, who already have tossed out one of Putin's puppets like 8 years ago, whenever it was that Zelensky got elected. Oh, that might give us some ideas. And look at the resistance on the part of the Ukrainians. Okay, let's not show that. They're not seeing any of this. So I think, you're right. A dictator or, somebody in power doesn't want to give people the idea that there's a way to get rid of them.
Well,
Right.
he's well protected in the first place.
Well, he is,
Yeah,
presumably, but let's hope there's some exit strategy somehow.
I hope so.
Yeah, we hope so. Okay, Jane, we're gonna go to the
Yeah.
next chapter, which is 5, and go down here.
Okay. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler." When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem, he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years.
So he's finally now the king. It's taken a while. It's taken a lot of blood, although none that he spilled. And remember Abigail, his second wife, who said to him, don't do it, right? Don't get blood on your hands. And he's kept that, in his mind as all of this blood has been spilled on his behalf, but he's clean and distanced from all of that. Okay, so now
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Is it significant, could you bring the text back
Oh,
up?
sure.
That they give the number of years for each separate part? In Hebron, he ruled over Judah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem, he ruled, is that significant, or is that just chronology?
I don't know, 40, that number 40 is one of those special numbers, like, the Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years. Moses was on the mountaintop for 40 days, so maybe it's a way to justify that number, that sort of perfect number. Because he was only over Judah for 7 years and the rest of it came later. So aside from that, I don't know. I don't think Alter has a comment on it.
Well, it might also have something to do with the continuing animosity when this was written between the North and the South.
Possibly, yes.
Israel
Possible.
and Southern Israel.
Yeah.
It might be reflecting that. I just thought.
By the way, I do have a note here about the chopping off the hands and feet, which apparently the dismembering of malefactors or prisoners was a common ancient Near East practice. So just so you know, that's what you do to bad people. We don't do that anymore, I hope, here. Anyway, we do other bad things, but not that. Okay, so now he's king. Now, notice, so David, let me just stop for 1 sec. So David's trajectory at this point is incredibly positive. And, as I said, when we started the story, it's a U shape for this narrative. He is little by little by little, more and more and more successful, right? It starts off as a young lad, killing Goliath, marrying Michal, marrying Abigail, everything. And then he's the one that, Saul has killed his thousands, but, David is tens of thousands. I mean, and people love him. He's handsome, he's successful, he's, everything he does, turns to gold, right? I mean, and all these people that are killed, he's completely able to distance himself. There's no reason that you think that he had anything to do with it. Now he's going to start consolidating power and the whole country, because the country has not been united up to now. I mean, Saul did not really succeed in uniting the country. He succeeded in getting started, but there were the Philistines, and he was not able to put together an army that could really fight the Philistines. And that was the main reason that the Israelites were asking for a king, is because of the Philistines. So now David is going to create the capital in Jerusalem, which will be the religious and the civic capital. The reason Jerusalem is so perfect is because it doesn't belong to any tribe, kind of like why Washington, D.C. was picked as the capital of the United States. It doesn't belong to any particular state. It's not a state, D.C., despite the fact that people want it to be one, people who live there. So he is doing all the things that he was meant to do as king, and the reason that a king was designated. And he's doing it all very successfully. And it's all going to go his way until I think it's chapter 9 or something. And then it's going to start falling the other way. And that's the shape of a tragedy. Let me see, is it chapter 9? No, it's chapter 11. Chapter 11. Yeah.
Right now he's like Lucy in Peanuts. She only wants up and up and up. She doesn't want any down.
Well, yeah. Well, he doesn't want any down either. However, he may not have a choice. So we're not going to get to 11 today. We'll get to it hopefully next time, which is the moment, the big moment of his. Okay, so let's continue. And here we are.
Okay, the king and his men marched to Jerusalem to attack the Jebusites who lived there. The Jebusites said to David, "You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off." They thought, David cannot get in here. Nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, which is the city of David.
Okay, let me just tell you what this lame and blind thing. Apparently, there's a Hittite text for swearing in troops, and they actually apparently put a blind woman and a lame man in front of the men to sort of indicate that, hey, guess what? If you don't win this battle, this is what's going to happen to you. And let me read you a little bit more. Just stop sharing for just a second. Okay, so the blind and the lame. This puzzling phrase, together with this even more enigmatic occurrence in verse 8, is a notorious crux. The most disparate theories have been proposed for how to read the words of the text and how to reconstruct what it said to go on in the conquest of the city. So one scroll from the Qumran reads, "You shall not enter here, for the blind and the lame have incited, saying, David shall not enter here." This variant has the advantage of fluency, but one suspects it may have been invented to make a difficult traditional text more intelligible. The explanation proposed by Yigal Yadin is probably the most plausible. He points to a Hittite text for the swearing in of troops in which a blind woman and a lame man are set before the men, with a monitory imprecation that their fate will be like that of those wretches if they fail in their duty. The Jebusites then might have displayed the lame and the blind on the ramparts with an analogous curse against those who would presume to attack the city. This taunting curse would explain why these maimed figures are, quote, despised by David. Okay, so just to say that it's not completely clear to people why that phrase is there. Okay, so let's go on.
On that day, David had said, anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach those lame and blind who are David's enemies. That is why they say the blind and lame will not enter the palace.
And by the way, so this water tunnel is, probably a water tunnel that brings water into Jerusalem. And then that's a way that they can come in stealthily.
David then took up residence in the fortress and called it the City of David. He built the area around it. He built up the area around it from the terraces inward, and he became more and more powerful because the Lord Almighty was with him. Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent envoys to David, along with cedar logs and carpenters and stonemasons, and they built a palace for David. Then David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel and had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. After he left Hebron, David took more concubines and wives in Jerusalem, and more sons and daughters were born to him. These are the names of the children born to him there: Shammua, Shobab, Natan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Nepheg, Yaphia, Elishama, Eliada, Eliphelet.
Remember, Eli means my God. So that makes sense to have a lot of names like that. So, by the way, this particular 4 verses is probably not chronologically, based, because Solomon is born much later. So this is not what happens right here. It's sort of a summary of everything together. So it's a weird place to have this. By the way, and I'll get to you, Christine, in just one sec. So notice that in verse 8, it says the blind and lame will not enter the palace. And that could be a little bit of a reference to Ishbosheth. Remember, he's the lame son of Saul who did not enter the palace because he gets killed, right? So that's kind of an interesting reference. Okay, let's see. Christine. You're muted, Christine.
Any idea why Hiram, the king of Tyre, would have sent so much tribute to David? That's a lot. Cedar logs and stonemasons, and I mean, wow. I mean, that either he's trying to curry favor big time,
right?
But what's the whole? If he doesn't, I mean, what is the notion that David could expect that kind of level of tribute, given how shaky the state is?
Yeah, I don't know, except what Alter suggests is that this is actually probably later in his reign, much later.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because you're right, it's pretty early in his reign for him to get all this, but I don't know. I don't know. He says that this is the Hiram with whom Solomon had dealings. David's palace building would have been undertaken rather late in his own reign in order to coincide with Hiram's regnal span.
Okay.
So, yeah, but
he would want to be a client state rather than completely, conquered. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it could be, that if it's later in the reign, maybe, David had enough money to buy all that stuff. Who knows? Yeah, but he's going to have a pretty opulent palace, but no temple.
Well, Rabbi, who wrote all this? Not rabbis, I hope.
Well, it was written by, I guess, priests.
Okay.
People who ran the temple, or at least it was orally transmitted, written down, and then it was shaped later on. There are those who think that this was shaped and edited by Ezra, the scribe, the prophet.
None of these people had consciences.
Well, okay, so does this sound different from what we're going through today in the world?
No.
Right? I mean,
history repeats itself.
Absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, this kind of barbarity still goes on amongst even what we consider ourselves to be civilized, right? We're so civilized. Look what we do to each other, right?
Right.
So I remember the first time I read the Torah, I didn't read the whole Bible, but just the Torah, I thought, God, nothing's changed. No. Sibling rivalry, favoritism in the family, people killing each other. I mean, it's unfortunately, it's a cycle that keeps repeating. We don't learn from history. It's really sad.
It is.
Right? And you'll see that the way in which David handles his own personal affairs is pretty pathetic. And you'd think somebody would learn from that, but no. Human beings are not really, I guess you can't teach an old dog new tricks, or even a young dog new tricks. So it is really quite sad. Yeah, Christine.
I don't think it's human nature. I really think it's state formation, because the state comes into being sort of through conquest and repression of kin. And, that's what we get is the, repression at home and expansion abroad. And that's a very long thing, but it's not older than the state, so you don't see people who are non-state peoples doing that. They
really
don't conquer. No, they don't conquer for space or region or anything else. They don't conquer. What they do is they have warfare, but it stops. I mean, it has a very clear limit.
Okay.
And that's pretty much true wherever the non-state peoples are, and regardless of whether or not they were targeted for colonization themselves. It's very interesting. This is really something that has to do with how states come about. For that kind of succession to occur, you have to distance your kin, except for the chosen few, and you have to basically give a reason for you being there that is free of kinship.
Interesting. Sherry, go ahead.
Christine, give an example of a
non-state people?
Yeah.
Okay. The Igbo in southeastern Nigeria, okay, were a people of 6 million people, okay, a lot of people, and they didn't even have chiefs, okay? In fact, they had a proverb, the Igbo do not like chiefs. And they had achievement hierarchies, so that, you could build yourself up to have a reputation, to have some regional influence, whether you were a man or a woman, by the way. And yet you could not command people. Okay, so persuasion is a high art in non-state peoples. It's really a person who can convince other people to do something is like really amazing, and people admire it. But you cannot order people to do it. Even where they had really sort of paramount chiefs, like in Polynesia, if someone was the paramount chief ordered the execution of somebody, it wouldn't happen unless the chief was physically present to make sure that it happened. Okay, because he couldn't really rely on anybody else to follow orders.
So you know what? I'm sorry. So what I was thinking though was you're talking about states, but I'm thinking about corporations.
Yeah.
In some ways, corporations behave that way too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can't be the rising up in the thing is okay at a certain point, and then if you are not pleasing to the CEO, you're gone. Okay.
But I am also thinking about colonization issues, like if you're right. I mean, if your raw material comes from a developing country, you have an interest in making sure that the people who are, in that country are not going to organize and rise against you or demand higher wages or whatever, right? I mean, it's a similar kind of control. Well, maybe not quite as bloody.
Politics.
When there was a one of the sort of sweatshop setups in Malaysia, in an area that had sort of recent annexation of peoples who were not previously in the state, okay, and they were the workforce. And this was written about by Iowa, an anthropologist, and strikes were forbidden by the state, and all kinds of dire things would happen to you if you tried to control the conditions of work. And so what the women did in this sweatshop was that they invented a kind of hysterical, writhing on the floor, right? As if they were having some kind of possession on a mass scale. Okay, so obviously that's a work stoppage, but what do you say?
Very clever.
It was extremely clever. So there are all kinds of what I love about studying peoples who are in that kind of colonial setting is the inventiveness of the use of custom tailored to the new conditions and how resistant it is. When I was in Tonga and in the Northern Island, which I decided to go to because it was the last to be annexed to the Tongan state, and had a female paramount chief who tried to avoid being called a heathen by inviting by the Wesleyan Methodists that were conquering the rest of the island with the help of the Methodist Church, which was providing arms, that she invited the French Marist priests from Tahiti to come and catechize them. And so the Northern Island was Catholic. Of course, that didn't spare them from being considered heathens. It just means that they were Catholic heathens. But it was really a hotbed of resistance. Okay, so I decided to do my field work there. And one day, I got to know the people pretty well. And one day this group of farmers said, hey, we want to show you something. And, come with us. We want to take you to a place.
Oh, I think it was her.
Okay. Oh, another furry beast. And
And lots of them around.
yeah, right. It's Saturday. Time for furry beasts to be on Zoom. And they took me, through these farms and to the very, very rocky hillside or cliffs in one part of the island, very abandoned. Okay, so and they showed me this group of 4 graves that were very, very carefully manicured and decorated and so on and so forth. And they said, we remember these people. And these were the 4 people who were executed by the new state for basically resisting the kinds of taxation that was
There you go.
being imposed by the state.
Yeah.
And so they were ordered to be hung and their
Oh.
bodies destroyed and so on and so forth.
There you go.
And the people buried them. And this was 100 years later or 150 years later. And the graves were still freshly
Yeah.
tended.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for sharing that.
There's that,
Yeah. All right. So are you reading, Christy? Who's reading? No, who is reading?
Suzanne.
Oh, okay. Suzanne. Okay. Sorry. Okay, let's move on. He's now David's going to conquer Jerusalem.
Am I reading?
I guess so. Yeah.
The king and his men marched to Jerusalem to attack the Jebusite. who
We already
lived
read
there.
this section. I think we're up to David defeats the Philistines.
Oh, we did. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh yeah, you're right. Tyre. Okay. Sorry. Here we go.
When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they went up in full force to search for him. But David heard about it and went down to the stronghold. Now the Philistines had come and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands? The Lord answered him, go, for I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hands. So David went to Baal Perazim, and there he defeated them. He said, as waters break out, the Lord has broken out against my enemies before me. So that place was called Baal Perazim. The Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off. Once more, the Philistines came up and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, and he answered, do not go straight up, but circle around behind them and attack them in front of the poplar trees. As soon as you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the poplar trees, move quickly, because that will mean the Lord has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine army. So David did as the Lord commanded him, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer.
Thank you. So this business here about, first of all, you see that unlike Saul, who couldn't get a direct conversation with God, God is completely, helping David, assuring him he's going to win, giving him tactics for winning. And in verse 24, where it says, as soon as you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the poplar trees, which sounds very strange. So here are 3 different possibilities for what that means. It could be the wind. It could be mysterious, unseen agents of God advancing against the Philistines. Or it could be that the sound of the wind offers cover to David as he's attacking them. But by the end of this chapter, David has inflicted a sound defeat against the Philistines. Okay, Christine.
Poplar trees are notorious for shaking easily.
Okay.
So marching would set them quivering.
Yeah.
And
could
so
be
you
that.
wouldn't have to have somebody in the trees. I mean, you could see, it's like the Jurassic Park water drop, you could like you could see it from the shaking of the poplars.
Right. It could, it could be that the army is making them shake. It could be the wind. It could be all kinds of things, at least, it gives commentators a lot to speculate about. Okay, let's see. Is Jane, Jane, you ready to read the next one? Except, yeah.
Yeah, there I am. Yes.
Okay, let me go to the next chapter, chapter 6.
Okay.
Here we go.
Oh, thank you for giving me this one. David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. He and all his men went to Baalah in Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim on the ark.
So remember that, people who are very pious usually refer to God as Hashem, which means the name. And remember, the ark was taken by the Philistines.
Right.
And the ark now has to be brought to Jerusalem because that will make Jerusalem the religious capital of this country.
Okay. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord with castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, sistrums, and cymbals.
Okay, so let me just, what's that?
Noisy.
Yeah, very noisy. So let me just mention that 30,000 men is the exact number of Israelites who were killed when the ark was taken by the Philistines. So now 30,000 are back to take the ark back. And it's a big moment, right? Bringing the ark back. That's, God's presence is supposed to be sitting there between the cherubs on top of the ark. Okay.
When they came to the threshing floor of Nakon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, God struck him down and he died there beside the ark of God.
So listen.
But you weren't supposed to let any of this fall to the ground.
Right. He was trying to stop it from falling to the ground, but somehow he got, zapped anyway. God doesn't always act the way we think God should act. So unfortunately, he gets zapped, just like those two sons of Aaron get zapped for who knows what they did. It's not clear. The rabbis try to find a justification for it, but there really, isn't anything clear in the text. They brought.
Like if you drop the Torah, doesn't the whole community have to do penance?
Yes.
I mean, don't you have to fast for 30 days or something
40,
like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, God doesn't always act the way God should be acting. Mm-hmm. Right?
Okay.
Wait till we study the book of Job, which I'm teaching starting in a few weeks. God does something really nasty there. Like, why don't I test this guy and make a bet with Hasatan, which is not Satan, and then let this guy inflict every possible hideous thing on him. So maybe he did not stop the ark from falling in the most respectful way. Who knows? Okay. And then David gets angry that God got angry.
Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah. And to this day, that place is called Perez Uzzah.
Perez meaning breach.
David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, "How can the ark of the Lord ever come to me?" He was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Now, King David was told, "The Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has because of the ark of God." So David went to bring up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. Wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets.
Okay, let's just stop for one moment. So remember, the ephod is some sort of linen thing that you wear, around your waist or your neck, suggesting that possibly he's not wearing anything underneath. It's important to know that for the next scene. So he's dancing and gyrating and possibly exposing himself, right? And he's really happy because he's just gotten this ark and brought it back. So now we're going to see his final encounter with Michal, another very sad scene. Okay, so let's just get it down here. There we are.
As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window. And when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart.
Okay, so before you go on, so the first time we met Michal, there was a window, remember?
Mm-hmm.
It was when she dropped David out of the window to save his life. And now she's watching him from a window, okay? Sort of bookends her story on either side. And remember, she loved David. Right now, she hates him, right? I mean, he not only left and never so much as said goodbye to her or checked to see if she was doing okay, but then she was given to a guy who really loved her and she was ripped away from him. Now, and of course he's married a lot of other women in the meantime, and he's leaping and dancing, and she's disgusted with him. And by the way, she's referred to as daughter of Saul, not wife of David. Okay. And that's how she's referred to again later in this particular scene. So she's not David's wife, she's Saul's daughter. So there's incredible distancing between them at this point. Okay, please go on.
They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it. And David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Lord. After he had finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty. Then he gave a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, and a cake of raisins to each person in the whole crowd of Israelites, both men and women, and all the people went to their homes. When David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants, as any vulgar fellow would." David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor." And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death.
Okay, so we're going to discuss more, but while this is up here, I just want you to see that this is the first time we've actually had a dialogue between David and Michal. They never spoke before. And she's speaking to him in the third person. And she's talking about how, distinguishing himself. I think in Hebrew, it's the word honor. It's an honor to bring the ark back, but she's basically using the word sarcastically, and, basically saying you're disgusting, you're exposing yourself to all these girls who are thrilled to see your whatever. And he says, yeah, I'm going to do that and more. And, who cares about what you think, right? I mean, it's pretty cruel. Well, pretty much on both sides, but, you can understand why she'd be pretty angry. And then we don't know. They had no children to the day of her death. Does that mean that because she spoke insultingly to the king that God made her barren? Or is it because they never got into bed together again? Did he refuse to sleep with her? Did she refuse to sleep with him? We don't know, but it does not end well. So
She may be barren. She didn't have any children with Paltiel either.
well, we don't know. I mean, it doesn't say it,
Mhm.
but that's very possible that she was barren. On the other hand, we don't hear about that until this scene here, right?
Mhm.
So it's a very sad story. As I said, bookended by the window, the first one being her heroically saving the life of her husband, and the one at the end about her, the women. Remember when Yael drove the tent peg into Sisera's head, and then Devorah sings about it, and sings about the fact that Sisera's mother is looking out the window, waiting for her conquering son to come back. And this idea of women behind the window, that, that's sort of, they belong in the home, and they're sort of, almost in a prison. So it already starts with her being in this, unfortunate position, but then she comes out to greet him. Remember, women come out to greet conquering heroes. So she's coming out theoretically to greet her husband, who has just conquered the Philistines and conquered the Ark, but she's only going to curse him basically and be sarcastic about this great honor that he's brought to the people.
And she's in an entirely new palace. She's not in the complex that Saul used. So this daughter of Saul, she's daughter of Saul, but in David's new palace. So once again, there's that conflict between wife and daughter. That's in the text.
Right. She's never referred to as his wife, though, here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really sad story.
Yeah.
Oh, Mickey, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. It said in here a little earlier that David did the sacrifices. I thought that was a priestly function. So
oh, good. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I meant to say something about the ephod. So he's wearing the ephod, which is supposed to be the priest's outfit.
Yeah.
And doing the sacrifice, yes. And I'm not sure that's a good thing, because it's very clear, and this is what happened with the Maccabees. The Maccabees arrogated to themselves the priestly and the kingly function, and those are always supposed to be separate, right? Moses is the leader, Aaron is the priest. And so thank you for pointing that out. It may be a little dig at David for doing that. And then there's a question, did he sacrifice a bull every 6 steps, or was it just the first time? I'm like, these people can find all kinds of things to, argue about. Any other comments before we go on? I mean, this does not portray David in a very positive light, right? Of course, from the beginning. I mean, people who are politically ambitious will, steamroll over anybody who's in their way, right? If it means divorcing somebody, if it means remarrying them, whatever it takes, right? But thanks for pointing that out, Mickey, because I did mean to say something about that. Okay, now we're on to the next chapter. And yes, please.
Just following up the last comment you made, and I'm thinking, well, yes, and yet from David's perspective, he asks God for guidance and what he should do, and God is always telling him exactly what to do and how to advance, and he's been anointed and all this. So he, at this point, probably feels like everything he's doing is justified. And
of course.
So there's the mistreatment of somebody wouldn't feel to him like it was anything except part of the plan that's already been working so well for him. And so he's been almost given this ability to disregard the feelings of others, because wherever he wants to move forward, God has been with him and he's having success. And that has almost given him license to be a horrible person. And it's such an odd contrast that we say God is with him, God has chosen, is giving him all this, and yet that somehow can even give a person the big head to think they can't do anything wrong and other people don't matter, which is such a strange thing, because we would think of, in our time at least, if we say that a person is godly, we think of them as being kind and compassionate and having all the positive characteristics. It's very odd, all the characteristics of God are helping him militarily and helping him strategically, as opposed to becoming a kind person.
Right. Okay, that's a very good point. And I know Christine and Jane have their hands up, but what I do want to say is that all along in the Bible, God may be on somebody's side and may have chosen someone to be the next ruler, the next patriarch, whatever. But that doesn't mean that the means by which they get there are always sort of sanctioned by God. If you think about, let's say, Jacob. Okay, so Jacob was predicted to be the ruler over Esau. Now, did that mean he should steal the birthright? Does that mean he should steal the blessing from his brother? I mean, it's like God has a certain plan for us. If you look at the first 2 chapters of Genesis, I keep going back to that. The first chapter is God's grand plan. Everything's perfect and everything's where it's supposed to be. Everything's good. Then God creates these people to implement God's plan, and that's when things go awry. So, and not that God always acts perfectly either, but the idea is that you have human beings to implement this plan, and so you're going to have some real problems in doing that. Even Noah, the only guy that got saved from the flood, the first thing he did was to get drunk and to have some strange sexual thing with his kids. Okay, Christine.
Yes, I want a little word for the slave girls here. They were obviously, they could be raped at will by the owners or any man who was like in favor with their owners. And yet the text, patriarchal as it is, portrays them as being attracted to his physicality, that basically they could never be raped by him because he was so handsome and he could be in the nude and so on. I just think that this is basically, the syndrome that we saw in Kavanaugh and everybody else, right? That somehow everything has to be consensual because look at him, right? And that his wife, that the patriarchal compact is that everybody blames the victim, and so Michal also says, oh, look, all you're trying to do is appeal to the slave girls, and the power relations are lost there, and the fact that these women were raped at will.
Thank you for pointing that out. And think about all the powerful men, no offense to any men here, but the powerful men who've, had all sorts of allegations, some proven, some not yet, about, transgressing sexual boundaries, right? Because they're powerful and they think they deserve it. Who wouldn't want to sleep with me? And supposedly power is an aphrodisiac. So maybe some women feel that, gee, aren't I lucky to get to sleep with this powerful person? It does happen with women sometimes as well, but women haven't had the position of power that men have had. So, Jane, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I have 2. Number 1 is the men in this group were powerful spiritually, which I think is better. And number 2, if I remember correctly, I think Michal is the only one that speaks, the only wife, concubine / whatever you want to call them, who actually speaks to David in a disrespectful tone. All the others, they just worship the ground he walks on, like you guys have been talking about. I don't remember a critical, maybe I'm wrong, I don't remember anybody criticizing him per se.
Right. I think you're correct about that. But what occurred to me while you were saying that is at the very end of his story, when there's a question of picking the successor to David. At that point, Bathsheba is the wife who's maneuvering. Now, she doesn't speak disrespectfully to David, but she kind of works around him, shall we say. And it's another kind of way of saying, you know, I'm going to make the choice, not you. It was a way for her to get a little bit of revenge over the fact that he essentially kind of raped her, okay, which we'll see in chapter 11. I mean, he sees her, he wants her, he sleeps with her.
Kills her husband.
Kills her husband, yeah. But I mean, to me, that sounds a little bit like rape, you know? See her, want her, sleep with her. And guess what's going to happen? His own son is going to do the same thing to one of his daughters. So unfortunately, yeah, these power struggles have not gone away either. So I think since we only have a few minutes, we're not going to start the next chapter, but what's going to be interesting in the next chapter is the fact that this guy, David, who, you know, we have problems with him here, right? He's going to get an unconditional covenant, which is interesting because the covenant with us, you know, with Israel and with Moses is conditional. If you obey my commandments, all will be well. Otherwise, you're going to be in deep trouble. Either you're going to die or be kicked out of the land, or something's going to happen to you. And it's not like there's not a covenant any longer with God, but it's conditional. Whereas with David, it's an unconditional covenant. You will always be sitting on the throne, and that hasn't worked out so well. So thanks for the promise, but it didn't really happen. Any final comments? It's really an intriguing story. I mean, the thing is, does anybody know what Michal actually said to David? No, somebody made this up, right? All these intimate conversations that we have, or the inner monologue of David, you know, I mean, nobody was there to record that. So this is a very, you know, literarily created story, you know. All we know about David is there's one piece of archaeological finds, you know, that has his name on there. And that's it. That's all we know. And it says house of David, somebody from the house of David. We don't even know if he ever was really a big king or if he was just a tribal chief. So, you know, this is all a beautiful, elegant fabrication, which was written and edited by the winners, which are the Judahites, which is where David was from. So it was to their benefit to create a hero, so-called hero, and to say that the Messiah is going to come from this guy, interestingly enough, right? Christine, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it's just that for Michal, I mean, this is an invention and it doesn't work as a dramatic device to have her looking out the window and turning away, going back to her weaving and saying, he's just an asshole, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It just doesn't lend itself to the story.
Right. Well, what's interesting, I think, is that it's sort of this contradictory portrayal of David. On the one hand, he's the big hero. This is the golden age of Israel and all of that. On the other hand, we see a lot of problematic moments. And so somebody was sensitive to that because the problematic moments that David has are private ones. So it's his relationship with his wife. It's his relationship with Bathsheba. It's his relationship with his children. They're all problematic. As a warrior, he's very successful. As a politician, he's very successful. But ultimately, what's going to happen is his problems with his kids are going to end up threatening his reign because he doesn't know how to handle his own children and his personal life. Again, do we know if that's actually ever happened? Who knows? Because all we have is this one little thing that says House of David. Yes, Jason.
Well, remember how we also note, that Moses has to be reminded that he has family at home that he's left and while he's off in the desert. So I think there is this tendency to always give us hero with anti-hero in the same, right? Like we're always supposed to know somebody thought about making sure that we see that these were not flawless people, that they had inner failings and that they could be as great in some areas, but also struggling in others. And I think that at least gives them the ones that we see fleshed out, right? I mean, I'm actually surprised at how much of David's story there is. I'm surprised it's taken us so long moving through his story, just because in what I knew before, I thought was this much smaller little section. So we get a lot with him through his whole life, which is, quite a, you're not going to be able to hide in that much story whether a person had flaws. And
well, excellent point. And as you know, the heroes in our Bible all have flaws. So that's a good point. Jane, last comment.
Oh, okay, last comment. Just riffing off of what Jason said, I think that the emphasis in the second part of David's story is on the family, because the family is literally the cornerstone of civilization, of community. And what happens in the family is the family only reflects what's happening in society. It's a mirror of society. So the chaos in David's family is being echoed, and it's going to be echoed through the centuries of the chaos in Israel's history.
Excellent. That's a great point and a great point to end on. Thank you, Jane.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you for all your great comments. And now, when are we meeting again? Anybody know?
Great session, by the way.
2 weeks.
Just fantastic. Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. So don't forget tomorrow, polarization, getting beyond it. If you can come, that will be a good session. And we're going to be very lucky to have Marcia Falk in a couple of weeks to see her new Haggadah. She's got a brand new Haggadah. So we got some good stuff.
Will that be on Zoom? Will Marcia Falk be on?
She was going to come here, but because of the pandemic, she prefers not to fly right now. So it's going to be on Zoom.
And I'd like to apologize for the interruptions, but we had some medical things that need to be
please. You don't have to apologize. You don't have to apologize.
Our
All right, everyone.
Yeah,
Shabbat shalom.
Thoughts and prayers are with your husband, Jane.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Suzanne, I love you. Thank you so much.